Rashonda Thornton, the host of the Dietitian Against Diets podcast show. Thanks to the local farmers and wonderful supporters such as Undeniably Dairy, we are proud to present to you the weekly Wellness Coalition panel series. This is a 10-part series where myself and a rotating cast of experts will discuss meaningful topics, focusing on what means the most to you during this COVID crisis. So that means every Thursday, I'll have panel guests that will bring great insights, perspectives, truths, and possible solutions. So again, thanks to Undeniably Dairy and the local farmers, this is able to be aired to you every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. on my Facebook page at Rashonda of Better Vessel. You can also see it on my YouTube channel and all other podcast stations and podcast platforms. So enjoy the show, and please reach out if you have any questions or have any topics that may be of interest to you. Well, hello and welcome to week 2 of the weekly Wellness Coalition panel. This particular week, we're going to focus on the impact of emotional and mental health during the COVID season. So I have with me 3 wonderful guests, and I want to do a quick introductory of them so you know who they are. So my first guest is Melissa Douglas. She is the founder of a TeleMental Health organization called Goal-Driven Counseling. As a licensed clinical social worker, she's also known as the virtual clinician. I also have with me Tom Duff. He is also a licensed clinical social worker who's had over 25 years as a mental health expert. He's also the director of the St. Louis Counseling Center here in St. Louis, as well as a podcast host of Mental Health Matters. And last but not least, I have Dr. Lisa Parker Scott. She is a clinical psychologist with over 20 years of experience and has worked in areas all the way from private practice to now being a team lead of St. Louis Psychiatric Rehabilitation Center. So I want to welcome all 3 of my panel guests today. I'm glad that you guys were able to be a part of it.
Thank you for having us.
Exciting.
Thank you.
Yes. So after introduction, I want everyone to really just kind of get a bit of information about each and every one of you, some of your areas of specialties within this, because I feel that all 3 of you bring valuable information to this particular topic. So we're going to just really kick off with talking about the diversity in your platforms, as well as how the impact of COVID-19 has impacted the way that you have responded over the last 8 weeks. So, Dr. Scott, I'm going to start off with you. So within working within the practice, what specific clientele do you serve, and how has this recent crisis adjusted your approach in a mental health capacity and all the things that you do within your profession?
Well, I work at St. Louis Psychiatric Rehabilitation Center, which is a long-term care inpatient psychiatric residential facility. Many of these folks suffer serious mental illness, as well as serious trauma, sometimes repeated psychological trauma throughout their lives. And so we're often working with folks to try to help them get relief from very debilitating symptoms of mental illness, as well as dealing with chronic mental health conditions. With all of this going on, and with the introduction of the COVID-19 crisis, we've had to work really hard to give information to our clients in the way that they could understand, and to be able to wrap support around them with their current mental illnesses and their vulnerability to trauma in mind. And so a lot of what we've done is try to find ways to make sure that they're still connected to their providers, even though some of their providers are working from home, to add more virtual connection and virtual support in lots of different ways. Because I also work with staff at the facility, and we're a residential care facility, we've had to work really hard to protect our clients and our staff as much as possible from infection. So a lot of what I've done is also educate staff with the emerging information as it's developed each day. Ended up being able to get masks for my staff made before we were able to get more shipments of PPE for our staff, and to be able to pass that information on to our clients as well, to balance giving them accurate information without overwhelming or making them too afraid and anxious. So with all of that going on, it's been quite challenging and frightening and overwhelming for everyone. I think finally what we've had to do is remember that we're all human and try to support one another through all of this, that this has been an overwhelming situation for everyone. But with all of that, I'd have to say I am so impressed by my clients and my staff. They have been amazingly and remarkably resilient. They've been very patient with one another. They've been incredibly compassionate. Even some of our folks that don't tend to be able to think outside of themselves because they have such daunting symptoms have been very compassionate.
Yeah, I can only imagine this, the transition working within the hospital context of it and dealing with people that are vulnerable right now with being affected, alongside helping those with in their mental capacity and making sure that they're served appropriately and protecting them at the same time. So it's amazing how, you know, when you're strapped to make change, you figure out a way to do it and it all ends up working out, you know. So Tom, so you yourself, now I know you may, you know, you I think you work with different particular like healthcare institutions, but you also work with churches and with schools, and so a diversity of clientele. And so you guys, St. Louis Counseling Center, you have more of a brick and mortar model as well as several sites throughout St. Louis. So with the changes and the limitations that we're having as far as person to person contact, how have you transitioned some of your services to better help provide keep those services going for those particular clients and patients?
Yeah, it's been an interesting, really month when you think about it since this kind of happened. But we've basically gone all virtual. We had 8 office locations, and then we were placing clinicians inside of schools to provide therapy. So we were in over 100 different schools. So then all of a sudden it became that world of like, wow, how are we going to do our services? And we had just started using a Zoom platform right before this started with one therapist and one school district. And then now all of a sudden we have, well, everybody doing virtual sessions. It's been challenging on a couple levels because of one, you know, as a clinician, over, you know, I'm a little bit older. If you look at the grade in my hair, right? But you know, it's very used to just doing traditional therapy with somebody in the same room. So even for me, it's been kind of a process. And so we had several therapists that had to walk through that, and then clients as well too, kind of having to engage clients like, hey, this can work. We want to be here. And we've been pretty pleased with our existing clients that they've been willing to either do telephone because certain funding sources, funding streams from county grants to insurance-based providers have allowed us to go towards telephone and virtual. And so that's been a blessing in itself as well. So even new clients coming on board because it's a whole different level that are more willing to do the virtual side as well too. Now, one of the challenges is with our school kids that are at home, as well as some of our clients, is accessibility to either a laptop, either through a telephone, minutes. We've had families say, like, you know, I can't use the minutes for a virtual session on my phone, and I need it for other purposes, you know. So we've had to be creative in how to try to reach kids as well as our older individuals as well too, our adults, with engagement and by giving them the tools. So we've had some funders step up and say, hey, here's an ability to buy minutes cards, and you know, and we know it's kind of risky sometimes. You're giving a teenager a track phone and say, okay, we want you to use this for therapy only. You know, it doesn't always go that well, but the reality is maybe it's also keeping them in contact with somebody else as well too, which is really important. So it's still therapeutic, but it's been a process, but it's actually going in the right direction. So we're pretty pleased.
Yeah, it's kind of like uncharted territory. Like, who would have thought that, you know, due to something like this, the default would be having to buy things like minute cards, you know, considering some of the things that some of the clients don't have. When you come from a traditional setting, that those are things you wouldn't even fathom as a limitation or what someone would need for this, you know. So again, creativity and figuring out a way to do it. I mean, that's what we're kind of like strapped to do right now. So I appreciate that you guys have a team of people that are finding ways to reach out to those communities that may not be able to just get on their laptop to communicate and keep the services going. Yeah. So speaking of, I've heard Dr. Parker Scott mention it too. Like she's going into the virtual world. Tom, you're going into the virtual world. Well, Melissa Douglas here. That's her. That's her thing. This is she has 100%. Her practice is 100% online. And so I want to open up opportunity for you because you're this is that's you that used to be a futuristic approach, but now it's like the approach, right? The present approach. So just give us some
Yeah.
insight on, what is telemental health and how the dynamics of having a virtual setting platform has really been valuable to you. And now, even with the transition of your clientele and getting the clients, like what have you seen as far as your client profile with new clients and some of your current clients?
Yeah, this is awesome to be here in the midst of these other professionals with a completely different experience. And I'll say too, I come from 10 years of working in nonprofits and things here in St. Louis, so it's not that that much that I'm so far removed from the experience too. But for the last about 2.5, we're a little bit closer to 3 years. My practice has been completely virtual, so when the pandemic started, it was seriously nothing changed for us. And I spoke with my team members and things, and I said, you know what? I'm going to save you one less email about the pandemic and shifts and changes because it's business as normal with us, and it is. I'm very grateful that I was able to have that experience, but it looked a little bit different for us. So in large, telemental health is when we're using clinical mental health services where the client and the clinician are in two physically different locations, but they're using telecommunications to connect. And so we do them 100% through video sessions, but absolutely you're able to do telehealth through phone. And then we have some asynchronous methods too, where people are texting or using email based services or chat services as well. So with the practice, we service 3 states, Missouri, Illinois, and California. And right now, surprisingly, we have not seen a huge shift. And we're still trying to figure out what's that, what's that about? Is it because nothing changed for us? Largely, like our other panelists here, we do not see a very acute population. So we have people that are experiencing some anxiety, some symptoms of depression, some traumas, but they're not at the level of acuteness for hospitalization. Typically in the past with telehealth, because we do what's called an assessment of fit for services, there are just some levels of care that in the past have not typically been recommended for online services. And it's been so interesting in the last month everything is okay now. So I've really been thinking about, so for the past year, I have been also consulting as a telemental health consultant with individuals and organizations to help them navigate, what does this look like as far as what platforms we can use, what do our consent forms need to include, and what does this process look like for our clientele is a lot of what I've been doing. And it's been very interesting to think about what this is going to look like post pandemic, because I think this has brought shined a very huge light. A lot of like what Tom said, one of my focuses has been not just on telemental health, but also equitable care, right? So we have to think about access. We have to think about the barriers that are still there. And although this is a great approach to treatment for some people still in underserved communities or rural communities, they don't have equal access to the service. So I've been thinking, like, this pandemic has shined a huge light on just some challenges still within our mental health care system and some systematic barriers. And how do we now, since in this time we have all band together to make sure that people have adequate internet or they have the technology or insurance companies are reimbursing for it, how do we have this continue, right? You know, on a federal level, we had some from the Department of Health and Human Services. They lifted some regulations on just doing telehealth and what platforms you can use. And like I said, insurance companies have made some changes. And so my mindset has really been in an advocacy space of how do we have this continue and not go back to placing all the regulations that we clearly see now don't necessarily need to be there. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I've been more personally, I've been more on the supporting professional side. I've done some webinars and trainings to help other people do it, but as a practice, we've kind of been floating kind of just the same, which I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Shines a lot of light on what's needed, and
Hmm.
maybe this is preparation for the future on a long-term
Mm,
basis.
I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. We I'm sure you guys did as well as myself. Um, so taking that conversation a little bit further, I know when it comes to mental health conditions and what people face and experience, there are a few highlighted common things that potentially people go through, and it's in light of like the COVID-19 crisis. I'm sure that's only fueling fire in certain people's life right now. And so, Melissa, I know when you think of mental health, it can also be a holistic approach, as it's also inclusive of their environment. It's inclusive of things that happens around them, not just that person. So in light
Hmm.
of the economic impact right now, what have you seen as some of the common concerns you see in people, particularly as not generally as a whole,
Hmm.
that they're facing emotionally due to finances, unemployment, access to food and medication? Like, what have you seen arise?
Hmm. Absolutely. I think there are some just collective experiences that many of us, not just the clients, but us as the providers are experiencing as well. And so definitely increased anxiety with there being so much uncertainty, there not being a lot of answers around this virus, and how do we, really flatten the curve, and there being no, cure for it and all those things. What does the future look like for us? So definitely increased anxiety has been a theme. There's been a lot of grief, and that's been across the board, right? So we definitely have, unfortunately, seen the tragedy that has come with unexpected deaths with the virus. But in addition to grief with unexpected loss in people, we also are grieving the loss of how our lives were. So I saw
Hmm.
in the beginning weeks of this, I also saw some people like kind of, in some way relieved or excited that, okay, no, this is not a great thing that's happening, but okay, this is a little bit of a slowdown to maybe the hamster wheel that we sometimes can feel like we're on, running from work to practice to whatever that looks like. But then a couple weeks later, it kind of settled in, it seems like, and people are now feeling the impact of not having the choice to do and engage in life in the way that they want. So definitely grieving, right? And even past grief being triggered as well. If I've lost someone prior to COVID-19, and now I'm reminded of death and loss all around me, that's now triggering other other just memories and feelings within myself, which then connects to some depression symptoms that have also arose because of the isolation and withdrawal that comes with being quarantined. So those are the major ones, and I think more. Another thing that I've been making sure that I validate people's experiences, because of the variance in experience and reality for people, right? So we do have a lot of people who have been impacted by losing work, and economic um, just challenges and insecurity in a lot of places. But then we also have people where that those kind of things haven't changed for them, and although they
Hmm.
are, in place in home, they do still have the security of income and employment. So there's been this added kind of idea of this comparative suffering, right? I'm a little bit upset of that I can't move as I like, or I might have some anxiety, or I might also be triggered in some way, but at least I haven't, lost my life, or at least, it's not as bad as other people have experienced it. And so I see them not giving themselves space to feel whatever that feeling is. And so a lot of what we've been seeing too is just making sure we validate whatever experience people are
Yeah.
going through, knowing that your personal experience is important.
Yeah, that's a good point. Really good point. The validation piece.
Hmm.
For I got a question for Tom. I think you can answer this one. So Melissa, you mentioned about anxiety as one of is a common thread you've seen just as a whole, as a general, as a population. Now,
Hmm.
what about those who already are experienced or diagnosed with anxiety, Tom? What what effects do you see that has a rise in the way that they handle things, and how do you see that in the long term, or how this may impact them moving forward in their life?
Yeah, I think it's kind of twofold what we've seen so far. For some that's already diagnosed with it, they've actually have a pretty good skill set to manage it. And so we've seen some of that. So they've had this toolbox that's kind of been built up with how to manage the daily anxieties and what's coming next. And then the other side is for some of our individuals who may be struggling and may not be maybe out there and they're like, do I have an anxiety issue or do I not? And then that's where we see that's been even more impactful on them. So it's some of our newer clients or some of our clients that have already been that had started coming in, and this is like pushed, them on a lot of levels, and a lot of it's that anticipatory anxiety where that fear of what's going to happen next is coming in. And so a lot of that has come with the news, right? You turn on the news, and of course we have news channels,
Hmm.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? And then they're almost mesmerized in regards to like what's going to happen next, and then which is normal because we don't know. I mean, this is something we've never experienced before, and that's some of the stuff we've been kind of preaching out is like, hey, none of us know what's going to happen. So part of this is you're not alone, and that's been a kind of a constant message we've been sharing. Um, so when you look at those two groups of people, that's been kind of what we've experienced, and so I think what happens with anticipatory anxiety is you might be able to manage through this process, and you're implementing some skills. But what we've also been hearing this second wave, possibly in the fall, there'll be COVID paired with a regular flu, and then that's like waving the flag to someone with an anxiety diagnosis, or someone that's like thinking if they have one or not, and that's like, oh my gosh, so we're going to have to go through all of this again, right? We're going to have to stay at home, and then people are going to die, and so all of those what ifs, the case of the what ifs comes up. So
Hmm.
it's helping with positive self talk. It's helping individuals develop that toolkit of like, maybe for me it's journaling, and I can get all these anxious thoughts out. Maybe for someone else it's like I resort to exercise. So it's figuring out what's appropriate for the person, but that's ultimately kind of the process that we're walking through with some of our clients.
Hmm.
And I'm assuming that it's all a spectrum, a
Hmm.
spectrum to the levels, to the frequency of it, and giving people coping tools. I'm assuming is you it's customized to how they use them, what has happened, what has worked in the past, and I think the idea of not knowing the future and that anticipatory fear right there and anxiety. Um, I feel like we all have that, but those who have already been dealing with and working with anxiety, like you said, it's just adding fuel to the fire. Do you
Hmm.
foresee, like, does that? And this is a question I don't know. Is it, I know, Lisa, like you mentioned, like you work with trauma patients.
Yes.
Tom, could this be like but this is still a question of Tom. Is this still could this be like a chronic trauma issue to where it can snowball and make things, create a new experience in their life where their anxiety rises continually on a continuum?
Yeah,
Am
definitely.
I
I
asking
mean,
it the right way?
yeah, I mean, from a trauma
Okay.
perspective, right? I mean, this
Mhm.
is, we're all experiencing some level of trauma through this.
Yes.
And that's something we have
Yeah.
to be really vigilant of, because what's going to
Mhm.
happen, right? If we don't have that self-care for ourselves, or reach out and get appropriate services that we may need as the individual, when these future traumas are going to happen again, right? We're going to experience it.
Mhm.
And it, that was, you know, I believe in toxic stress. I believe in trauma, but then at times they become buzzwords too, right? There's a lot of people that get on board with that term, and then all of a sudden it goes away. But if you think about the toxic stress of what we're experiencing right now, it is
Mhm.
real, and we are working through it. And for those that maybe don't have access to service, or those that um, aren't aware of it because they're in the middle of it and they can't take time to take care of themselves, it's going to catch up. And then that's where, us as
Mm,
people that are in the helping field, right, are ready to help those individuals.
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Good point. Good point.
Mhm.
Another big common response I've seen too is um, the isolation piece. And Lisa, Dr. Scott, Dr. Parker Scott, I know it's one thing to feel lonely, but it's another thing to be in that place when isolation is kind of mandated right now. And so when it's connected to your mental health, like how does that play a role in creating, kind of a cascade effect? And with that, how what are some coping and building skills can someone have that can kind of help them through these times when they're physically alone?
Mhm.
Sure. I think central to that is feeling the powerlessness and finding that sense of control. And it's really difficult to find that when so much of our lives is upended and disrupted, even just for someone who isn't personally being impacted beyond just staying at home and trying to stay safe. There are still so many losses that someone is going through, uh, being separated from people from work, separated from their loved ones, having all of their daily routines disrupted. But particularly if someone's lost their job, they're worrying about their finances. If they have the worry of themselves getting sick, or they have a serious medical condition, if they love someone with a serious medical condition, there's all sorts of ways that can be compounded. And being isolated, I think this crisis has made so many of us become much more aware of how much we really need others and how much we
Mhm.
rely on others, not just for love and for caring, but for our basic necessities, for getting our
Mhm.
groceries and utilities, and for having things delivered, and how much risk that can place others at nowadays has taken a whole new level of meaning. And that's really increased how much we feel isolated when we're not able to get those connections, and when we're pulled away from all of that. And so it's very easy when we have so much that's not under our control to focus on all that isn't under our control. And whether it's with my clients at the facility, or the staff I'm working with, or my friends and family, or myself, trying to focus on what is under our control and trying to kind of turn to that here and now. What am I aware of? What can I do to just stop and take a deep breath? What can I do to focus my awareness in a way that will help me regain
Mhm.
some of that control, feel that, and feel that calm, and then take one thing at a time from there on. It doesn't feel very powerful when we're thinking of all of the things racing around us. And yet it's amazing to me that even when people are devastated and have been hit with multiple losses, just being able to stop and really kind of regroup is really essential. But then also being able to find other ways to connect. For a lot of people, this has been a technology intensive to be able to learn how to really connect. I I'll admit I downloaded WhatsApp for the first time and found out that my son will smile while we're talking because I can see his face now, since I'm not seeing him because I work in healthcare, other than for walks in the park or when we WhatsApp. And so something as simple as that, using Zoom to connect to other family members, or being able to use video conferencing with my team members and with our clients when we have meetings with them, and connecting clients to each other and to their family, things that we were just starting to entertain how to introduce this technology. So it's been a real silver lining to have people be able to connect that way. And it's amazing how much more powerful that face-to-face interaction really is, and how much that combats compared to just an email or a text or a phone call. So I think trying to recommend people schedule that in, that it doesn't just happen, and making sure that we take care of ourselves that way is essential. And also building in other routines. If people work out and exercise with people before, trying to find a way to meet up and do social distancing, walking around a track together, or walking through a park that's open, or through a neighborhood, or sitting several feet apart and talking and catching up, can be much more powerful than being able to talk on a phone. So I think all of those things are really essential, and we've really had to wake up to what helps us connect and what feels most healing and combat.
Those are great points. One of the things, I'm glad you mentioned those things, because, and I'll just say this, I had a personal experience this morning. One of my friends FaceTimed me, and it was very, very great seeing them. And they're a person that really enjoys, they're extroverts, so they get their energy from other people. And they're going through such a hard time, and they've had bouts of depression. And so this is only, like I was talking with Tom, like it's only for anxiety, it's only fuels the feeling of loneliness. And what I found from our conversation with that person, made a comment, was like, I have just, done away with the social distancing because I just have to be around people. I just have to be around people. And so as they were saying it, I just kind of arched my eyebrows in surprise, because when people are that desperate to have human contact, they're willing to put their life or someone else's lives on the line in light of this right now. And so I think it's very important to learn strategies and coping skills, and utilize social media, and utilize other ways to communicate and connect with people, so that you do have something to suffice that need, versus you're taking, you're being a little bit more radical in your approach just because you feel you need that immediate physical connection. Yeah. So I'm glad
it is really hard.
Yeah. So, and this can be this is kind of an open question. Now I know that a lot of times someone is diagnosed, it comes from different places. Do you, and you kind of spoke upon this, but what is the probability of someone to become, become unwell, during this to where they become diagnosed to it? Is it a higher probability in any area of mental health due to the pandemic?
I would say yes and no. I think there's a difference between feeling stressed and having reactions to something that is devastating and widespread and unforeseen, and that we have difficulty kind of figuring out how to cope with, and that figuring out how to cope with that and being able to do what we can, that's in kind of the normal realm, and that a lot of people can do that. Feeling like we're not able to adapt, or being slammed with huge losses, or feeling like we're just not able to catch a breath, or that we were at a liability before. People who are falling in those kinds of categories or in those kinds of events are more likely to feel like they've got something that is just not budging, that just their normal coping strategies aren't enough. They're not helping them, or this is too big. It's too devastating loss. And so that would be more something that would be considered a post-traumatic stress disorder or an anxiety disorder or a major depression of some sort. I think it really depends. I think it's certainly, though, is much more likely the more kinds of tragedies that people are dealing with. It is much more inevitable. I will say that everyone going through this right now is feeling some level of stress. It would be the exception for people not to feel stressed by any of the things that have been happening over the last couple of months. And so that makes it normal and not a mental disorder. It's still not, it doesn't feel very normal to have things be so different. And I think that kind of upheaval is really difficult. So it takes being able to figure out how to cope with it. But what Tom, you were saying about when people have dealt with really difficult anxiety, for example, or another serious mental illness, or they've dealt with trauma, they may be much more resilient. And so they may be coming out of this saying, okay, yeah, this sucks. And, oh, I do not like this. Okay, I need to get stuff together. How am I going to do that? And they may be able to more quickly mobilize than someone who's never dealt with something that's been traumatic before. I do think that if people are finding themselves in this place, though, where they are devastated, where they don't know which way is up, where they can't sleep, where it's hard to eat, they're worried about everything, and they have real traumas that they're dealing with, real losses, or if this is just raised every fear for them and they've never had to worry about these kinds of life and death concerns, even if they haven't lost anything yet, per se, like a person that they're caring about, that someone has died or become ill or that they're ill, they still have had many other losses. Those things, when you're finding yourself in that position, it's really helpful to know that that's real. Just because, that's real trauma. And we all have the capability of feeling traumatized right now. And so doing what we can to reach out to people who love us is absolutely more important when we're feeling so blindsided. Reaching out for professional support virtually is absolutely more of an option, even more now than it was before all of this. Just talking to the people we love and letting them know, as hard as it is, that we're struggling. And not expecting that we're going to problem solve it away or do it right and feel better, that this is an incredibly unprecedented and challenging, rough time.
It is. It just, it's the reality though, and it's good to be able to discern, is this something that is kind of temporarily because you're going through this, or is this snowballing into something that needs more attention to it? So and with limited, now that I think we're all in a position where we're having to adjust to the more virtual platform. I know that, Tom, you mentioned some of the problems that it presented itself, especially going through school, working with school districts and working with churches. And I know you guys are working towards finding ways to kind of keep their services going as we're moving forward, knowing that school is pretty much out for the year. There probably aren't any classes. Have you guys just kind of, what would be some ways that maybe perhaps you guys have thought about, or will be some good ideas to kind of keep a connection to those prospective communities that your organization has been working with?
Yeah, it's almost going like old school in a couple different ways, because with a couple of our therapists, they recognize the issue of trying to maintain contact, because all of our school therapists are still working, and they're trying to engage by calling parents, by calling and getting permission to talk to the kids directly. The kids, they could talk inside of schools. Now we're at home, we need to talk to the parents, and get permission. but kind of went back to an old-fashioned newsletter that's being sent out to some of the families in certain neighborhoods and communities, and because that's an easier way of doing that. Getting messages inside of church bulletins and things of that nature. And so it's we have technology available, but then using methods that are accessible for people and where that is at for them too. So maybe the community newspaper as well too, and flyers going out in the mail. So I mean, those are some things we've been looking at how to engage, and then also just trying to do our best to help parents during this process as well too, to say like, hey, you still got to have your kid on a schedule. They're used to that schedule this time of year anyway. Let's somehow try to implement a similar schedule with sleep, with what they're doing during the day, right? And so, which that structure, kids and as well as adults, there's as much as sometimes we push back on that structure because we're like, you can't tame me. I personally, I do better when I have some structure. And if I don't, I get bored because that's one of the main things we're hearing from our kids that were our existing clients inside of school. They're bored. And it's like, and we know what happens with boredom, right? That turns into trouble sometimes, or poor decisions that are being made because there's a teenage mind going on. So, trying to get some of those ideas and concepts out there, and using some more traditional methods, even of delivery.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And Melissa, I want to get some of your opinions too. As you said, this extension of being quarantined or have limitations continue, what are some ways that what are some tips and ways that you can help individuals dealing with mental health issues or conditions? I don't want to say issues, but conditions, experiences that may have not already been addressed.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of what Tom was just sharing because even with a virtual practice, we've been going pretty old school too, with connecting with community-based organizations and businesses. We always say, the people that have the natural contact, with the clientele is someone that's important for us to be connected with. So we've been also doing some of that communication, making sure that we're providing just good information, online or participating in, things like this or when other platforms are having different discussions, making sure that we're giving tips and just a little bit of psychoeducation so that there's a wealth of just free, accessible information out there and wanting to make sure that mental health and emotional health is something that's also in the conversation. But another thing that we were doing, and we planned it like literally right before this happened, and we are just like, oh, I guess it's a perfect time to do it. We also implemented some virtual groups as well. So we have been like your support groups. We're not quite doing, therapy groups, but more just support groups on different topics so that, again, like, we've all said people know that they're not alone, that there are people. We have one group that is focused mainly on people that are having challenges with setting boundaries and developing just self-care routines right now because we see people that are isolated by themselves. That can be hard to get on a plan, but then people that are in households with other people, it can be hard to figure out, when's family time, when's my time, and not feel just this, we always have to be together, knowing that as individuals we need individual time as well, or having be so accessible to other people. People are expecting the increased Zoom calls or increased communication. I'm seeing some people say like, "Hey, I don't really feel like socializing right now," in that way because everything is online. But we're hoping that these support groups help people to again get information, talk with others who are experiencing similar things that they are and get some of those just tips and tools and build up their toolbox so that they can navigate through this and navigate through it well. So yeah, just really want to continue to encourage people to pay attention to your individual experience, anything that feels out of the norm, knowing that there are some things that are that are happening, that are shifting. I'll fully admit that I stay up too late some nights watching Netflix and my sleep is now off. But that's different from me starting to have trouble falling asleep because I'm worrying a lot, or I'm not able to stay asleep because there are a lot of things on my mind, or I'm noticing that I'm eating a lot less or I'm eating a lot more, or I have no motivation or energy to get out and maybe take a walk around the block or connect with someone that I might not have spoken with. So definitely just continuing to have people pay attention to anything that feels, largely out of your norm, and being very patient with yourself. There's a lot of people that are navigating so much at home. I'm a teacher, I'm employee still, or I might not be employee, and now that has stress. I might be, from a distance taking care of family and things, and there's so much pressure to do it all from this one confined space, right? And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
I've encouraged people to create a schedule that works for you. And some days that schedule is going to go well, and some days it's not. But that's completely okay too. So
Yeah.
just very individualized focus is right now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mhm.
Good that you guys are expanding your programs to be more inclusive and create different options for people. Yeah.
Mhm.
And keep them engaged. Um,
Yeah.
so as we're closing, we all know that mental health is connected to the whole all the spokes of this life, whether it's physical health, emotional health, how we take care of our bodies. It's a part of the
Mhm.
entire will. So what? Just real quick, if each of you can give me just kind of a quick, maybe 1 minute, what would be some holistic approaches you would encourage your clients to implement into their lives that make really help them with their coping and dealing with their mental health conditions? I guess Tom, I'll give you the mic first.
All right. Um, well, a big part of what I always say is sleep, exercise, and nutrition. Those are three huge things that a lot of times make remarkable improvements in your overall mood and emotional health and mental health. And as much exercise as you can get in, even if it's a walk, but if you can get that heart rate up, right, it makes a big
Mhm.
difference. Eating healthy, of course. Stay away from my favorite food, the Pop Tarts and the Twinkies and the all those things, right? And of course, sleep, getting as much sleep. Depending on what research you read, anywhere between 7 and 9 hours, somewhere in there. I go back and forth, but that'd be my way of looking at it right off the bat. So sleep, exercise, nutrition.
Mhm.
Thank you. Dr. Parker Scott, how about you?
I absolutely echo what Tom's saying, and I would add mindful relaxation. Uh, Pay attention to focusing your mind in a relaxing way for a chunk of time every day, and start with something that you really love. Listen to your favorite music. Pay attention to the spring flowers outside your window, or better yet, when you go for a walk, pay attention to all the colors and the smells. The other thing I would ask when people try to exercise or eat right or get more sleep, start with a realistic goal. Trying to say, okay, what's one thing I can try to do today?
Mhm.
And start to try to do something every day. Start with things you like. So if you don't want to do a video workout, don't do a video workout. If like rather go for a walk, then go for a walk and start with 20 minutes, but try to get a brisk walk pace going and go through an area that you're familiar or that you would like to walk through, and
Mhm.
enlist support with your friends. So if you're trying to set one goal for that day, make sure that you then talk to a friend that you know is going to support you in that goal, and that may help you be more likely to carry that goal through. So
Mhm.
that's
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
I'll definitely echo mindfulness from the space of taking opportunities to connect with yourself more. So, detaching from the news and social media and all the other noise that I like to call it outside of us, and focusing internally on just who am I and what do I like and what does this make me feel and what do I need. that's a question that I encourage people to always ask, like in moments, what do I need right now? And materializing that. But then I will also add to that our environments absolutely mirror sometimes what we're feeling internally. So if our environments are an absolute mess, we're probably feeling a mess inside, you know? And so if I think this is a great time and opportunity to do some cleaning, to do some organizing, to get to those, you know, projects that, you know, they don't have to be overwhelming, but, you know, we have that, you know, that piece of furniture that we have been saying we want to move and clean behind and sweep behind and organize our rooms and, you know, just make things feel and look uh in a way that just makes us feel good about our space. And if it's a space that we have to be in for, you know, an unforeseeable time, then it might as well feel good to be there too. So mindfulness and having our environment reflect kind of what we desire to feel.
Yeah, great. I love it. Wow, everyone has brought some meaningful conversation topics to this panel, from a diversification of different avenues, and you all come together under the same umbrella as far as
Mhm.
how to work with what you're dealing with, the resources that are out there, the different things and programs that you guys are transitioning over to make sure that your services are still fulfilling those in need. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come on this particular panel topic. And last but not least, I want to make sure everyone has a way to contact you guys. We will put all your information up on the feed in the post. But if you want to give your website and your number or your contact information, we'll just close it up after that.
I'll go first.
Melissa, you can go first. Yeah.
Yes, I'll go first. Our website is probably a good place for us. It's www.goaldrivencounseling.com, and we're on Facebook, Instagram, and our website links to all of those.
Thank you. Tom?
I would say, sorry.
Well, you can go, Dr. Parker.
I can go ahead. Okay. Just doing like the Hollywood Squares rotation. So I would say probably my email is the best place to reach me, which is lisapscott@sbcglobal.net. And I will answer emails as promptly as possible.
Thank you. And last but definitely not least, Tom.
Yes. So you can go to our website, stlouiscounseling.org, and you got to spell Saint out. So stlouiscounseling.org, and you can see our services, and my contact information is on there as well.
Okay, great. Well, we have it all. Well, thank you again. And everyone out there, be safe, be smart, and work through these times where we all are in this together. Thank you. So continue to come back for more wellness-related topics. Please join me every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. Central Time, right here in my dining room to help give you information on all wellness-related topics that mean the most to you during these times. And don't forget to support our students by going to www.genyouthnow.org to learn about their grant funding program in response to the COVID-19 crisis. It's called For School's Sake. So follow them on Facebook and Instagram and see all of the impact they are making by supplying schools with resources and food needed to keep our students safe and fed. So thanks again and see you soon.